I got a D report card. I got a D grade on my draft. I'm projected, I think, 10th in the standings. I don't know where I am in wins, but I'm projected 10th in the standings. I will tell you this. Last year, I also got a D on my report card. I was also projected like 10th or 11th. So I take it as a badge of honor. Mark my words. I am the champion of this league. And I don't want to sit here and put up bulletin board material saying I'm going to repeat. But here's what I will tell you. I'm beating these two a-holes. That much I can promise you. That much is happening.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Connor Rogers, Jay Croucher, and yes, the League of Assholes repeat champion, Matthew Berry. The floor is yours, my friend. Have at it.
Promises made, promises kept. That's right. Yahoo's, I just want everyone out there to know that if you ever get a draft grade after Yahoo draft where they say like, you're a D, you're an F, you're going to finish 10th, 11th, 12th, don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about because once again, I am your champion. I'm a two-time champion. Is it a dynasty? I say yes. I don't know why Yahoo didn't like me drafting Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels in a super flex league. I don't know why they didn't dig Bucky Irving or Mike Evans, both of whom I drafted. I don't know why they didn't like Ken Walker, who, was good for different parts of the season as well. Don't know why they didn't like Terry McLaurin, my stack with Jaden Daniels. Don't know why they didn't believe I would pick up and see a huge game from Ameer Abdullah in week 17. But for whatever reason, they didn't see that. We put it on the virtual bulletin board. We used it as motivation, and we defeated all comers. We took down the grape slappers. We took down Fantasy Life commenter. Stupid Dev came and went. And then Big Show tried to get cute, tried to hoard all the tight ends from me, but it did not work. I got double digits from Chigaconquo. Once again, Big Show taunted the fantasy gods, and the fantasy gods said, oh no, Big Show, that is not karmically sound. And so my team rolled over Big Show. I slapped him like a grape, Jay. Your team should take notes on how to actually slap some grapes because I grape slapped Big Show into second place. I am your champion. Please refer to me for that the next 365 days as your Lord. Once again, I will once again be a benevolent leader, though.
Okay. Well, firstly, that sucked. That all sucked. Secondly, you didn't beat me, Matthew. I beat you. And the only reason you won and you also lost to Connor. And the only reason you won your championship is because you dodged us for external reasons. And then thirdly, it's good to see that you're celebrating by filming this in a closet.
Panic room.
Which looks like the panic room from Leave the World Behind with Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke. A little watch film that's actually kind of sneakily a 7 out of 10. But yeah, no, good. Well done, Matthew. Well done on all fronts. Congratulations on your title. And I hope you come last next year. That order is restored.
Well, I appreciate all that, Jay. Yes, I am once again in the closet, in my house because I got 10 kids here. They're all loud. They're running around, kids and girlfriends and friends and blah blah blah. So it was the only place that I could find that's actually quiet for me to once again give a victory speech. It's becoming rote by now. It's becoming old hat. I'm trying to find different ways to say like, wow, I'm the best and you guys are not. You are correct that during the regular season, Connor and Jay, you guys both beat me during the regular season. Congratulations. You guys can hang that on your next year participation trophy. Like, oh, regular season wins. Yeah, I mean, like, exactly. Like Jahmyr say. I mean, like, honestly, guys, I mean, the truth of the matter is the last time I checked, who they care about is Super Bowl champions. And you guys could have played me if you could have gotten past Big Show, but you didn't. You guys couldn't. You couldn't even get into the did Connor even make the playoffs? I didn't even know. Like, okay, fine.
I lost to Dev. Dev had a good team.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, you lost to stupid Dev who lost to me. So I mean, like, yeah.
Well,
you
yeah,
had
you lost all
shot
the
at
players
me.
the week he played you. You had some good fortune this year. You were really due for it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Listen, I had faith in 5. No one else believed. No one else. I had the foresight to draft Josh Allen. No one else believed in Josh Allen. In all seriousness, though, you have to Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, Derrick Henry, by the way. Derrick Henry as well. People question the Derrick Henry pick in the
Including
second
yourself.
round, and that obviously ended up working out.
My favorite part is after we do our draft, we tape reactions and banter and everything. And Matthew felt good about his team, and rightfully so. He repeated as champ. But the one takeaway he had was he really regretted not taking Isaiah Pacheco over Derrick Henry.
Yeah, exactly. Can we go back to that, please,
We have
Matthew?
the footage somewhere on the internet.
Yeah. How did you feel at the time about taking Derrick Henry, Matthews, on pace for almost 2,000
It's just like
yards?
I was just like, thinking it was full PP. I had thought we were half PPR because we were on Yahoo, which is their default, and so I had thought I'm like, should I have taken Pacheco instead of Henry? I don't know. I'm worried there, but ultimately I did take Derrick Henry, and
By accident. Okay.
Oh, man, as you see the final results, I mean, Big Show was limping into this championship. And you know what? He put up a good effort. He had good skill players. He just didn't have the quarterbacks.
152. Yeah, it's Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco strikes again, just inflicting pain on more good people who live in America. I guess Joe Flacco, I mean, ultimately, an ultimate Joe Flacco type of performance with the 2 picks, but still putting up 17-plus points. Yeah, very disappointing that Matthew was carried by men that he didn't actually want on his team, such as King Henry. It's just annoying that Chigakonkwo did what he did as well. And then Matthew cheated. He wasn't supposed to have the number 1 pick in the draft to draft Josh Allen. I had the number 1 pick in the draft, and then somehow there was a reordering. And by the time we got to the draft, all of a sudden, like, oh, Jay, you're picking 8. Oh, really? I thought I was picking first. I was going to take Josh Allen, which would have made all the difference. But no, that's okay. Matthew pulls the strings, and he winds up with a second tainted championship.
We set the draft order, and then we get to do the draft, and everybody looked up and said, oh, this isn't the draft order, but we can't change it.
Yeah, we can't change it.
Because we started the draft.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just your year.
Yeah.
Like this was just Matthew's year from top to bottom.
Not sure if 2024 live at noon on the cock or 2017 Houston Astros, to be honest.
People are questioning that.
That is the parallel that I would draw. Yeah, some trash cans, some changed draft orders.
So, Fantasy Champions, you drink for free at the Happy Hour bar today. Shout out to all of you that are watching today, and you woke up a fantasy champion. Hopefully, we helped you out somewhere along the way.
Hope so.
Hopefully, and hopefully you stick with us throughout the playoffs where we have a lot of good stuff coming your way. Because today, we got Monday Night Football takeaways, a lot of scoring in Monday Night Football. Waiver wired a little bit different. We're going by motivation factor. So Week 18 motivations, who's playing to win, who's not, and who is somewhere in the middle. As we questioned yesterday, Jay, we talked about, we didn't know what Dan Campbell was going to do. Not shocking he floored it, because it's Dan Campbell, absolutely. And good call on Jahmyr Gibbs under 19.5, but boy, did he make you sweat it till the very end.
Never in
Yes.
doubt. No, he finishes with 18 carries. That line at one point, after we talked about it, got down to 15.5, jumped back up to 17.5. There was a little Craig Reynolds action, which there feels like there should have been a lot more of. But, I mean, they got through the game unscathed. But at the same time, the ultimate Dan Campbell performance, putting up 40 with all of his starters in a game that's completely meaningless when they're about to play the Vikings for the 1 seed on a short week.
And we'll close out the show, of course, with Back to the Futures bets, as we always do on Tuesdays. But let's continue our Monday Night Football takeaways. We had some top fantasy performers. Obviously, a lot of scoring in this game. But, Matthew, the biggest surprise, I think, is this was the Ricky Pearsall breakout game, the first-round pick. Obviously, it's been an up-and-down season. Of course, this was somebody that was shot in a robbery, an armed robbery to begin the year. But he's been back on the field for a while now, and he has his biggest game of the year last night.
Unbelievable performance. I mean, like, there were questions about Ricky Pearsall. Would he play football again? Right? Obviously, awful thing that happened to him in the preseason. Comes back and. Yeah, I agree with you. It is sort of the breakout game, right? 8 for 141. He gets the touchdown. They even use him in the backfield a little bit as well. 28% target share here. And 5 of his 10 targets came in the slot. I think Kyle Shanahan said, all right, you know what? Listen, it's second to last game of the season. We're not going to the playoffs. Might as well take the training wheels off and see what it looks like here. We know Brandon Ayuk is back with his team, right? But what we don't know is about Deebo Samuel, what they look like. Could this be 3 wide receiver sets? Ayuk, Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall, who they used a high draft pick on Pearsall as well. So I thought this was really interesting. He's had 4 games this year with at least a 15% target share, and he's averaging over 15 fantasy points per game in those games. And so I think it's pretty interesting that just, again, when he has been able to get some work, he has shown why he was so highly thought of coming out of Florida, Connor. I really impressive here, but fantasy takeaways for next year, I don't think we can say anything because we just don't know what this Niners offense looks like, right? You know, is McCaffrey coming back? I know he says he's gonna, but is he definitely coming back? Could he retire in the offseason? Could Deebo Samuel move on? But I thought just from a skill standpoint, Connor, he looked like the kid that we were all excited coming out of college.
Yeah, he was one of the best separators in the draft. At Florida, he got to play both inside and outside, and that's exactly how the Niners used him in this game. 5 of his 10 targets came from the slot. We always talk about how the slot has become a fantasy cheat code, especially with the manufactured targets and the fact you have the two-way go. And it's a PPR cheat code. So Ricky Pearsall, this is what I was expecting more of this year because of circumstances. Obviously, it took a while to get there. If they move on from Deebo Samuel in the offseason, Jay, I personally will be very high on Ricky Pearsall going into next year.
Where do you think he stacks up in the pecking order between, if we assume that Ayuk is still probably the number 1 when he comes back, does Pearsall emerge as the number 2 over Jawan Jennings?
I think maybe not out of the gate because of Jennings' familiarity, but yes, over time. And Jennings, you in theory, because of his size, you like him on the outside. And once again, it goes back to the fact that Pearsall could eat up slot reps as well. So that's one of those ones where you're going to draft him, late in August. You're going to hold him on the bench. You're not going to love that you haven't gotten a ton of production out of him maybe in the first couple weeks of the season, and then he can explode. So, yeah, I think really big days ahead for Ricky Pearsall and a really good investment, especially in a dynasty league.
Yep, absolutely. The offense is still loaded, and the offense hasn't had a bad season. No. Even though Purdy, the shine has certainly come off. He throws the 2 bad picks last night, but, I mean, they still are loaded with weapons. They've been an efficient offense when Purdy's been out there. It's just the defense has been catastrophic at the wrong time.
Yeah, they ran out of bodies on defense. They've been playing without Trent Williams on offense. So the Niners are still well coached. They're still going to be a good offense, and there's obviously a lot of reasons to be high on a lot of their skill players. It's just one of those Murphy's Law years for them. Yeah. Like everything that could go wrong went wrong for the Niners. On the other side of this, we briefly touched on this, Jay. Jahmyr Gibbs plays into the fourth quarter. Matthew, so people that needed Jahmyr Gibbs for their fantasy championships, they got what they needed, especially the touchdown at the end of the game. But it was a difficult one to figure out if Dan Campbell would lean on Gibbs the way he did, but everybody was rewarded that started him.
Yeah, God bless Dan Campbell, who is obviously one of the favorite coaches of NFL media, of the Detroit Lions, of the Detroit fan base, and fantasy managers everywhere, because there was every argument to be made like, hey, you've already lost David Montgomery. You're banged up in the defense. You've had injuries have been such an issue for this Lions team that's built to win a Super Bowl this year. You wouldn't have blamed anyone if they said, hey, you know what? This game doesn't mean anything. Minnesota does. Let's play a quarter. Let's play a half. But absolutely, Dan Campbell said, absolutely not. We're going balls to the wall. We're going for it on 4th down. We're playing our starters. We're playing our game. And so Jahmyr Gibbs gets 22 touches in a quote unquote meaningless game. Monster fantasy day. He's been nothing short of phenomenal all year long, but especially since David Montgomery went down, where he's averaging over 25 fantasy points per game. He finishes the week as the 2nd best running back in fantasy, over 26 fantasy points, and he's been kind of a superstar during the fantasy playoffs. As over the last 4 weeks, he's the 2nd best running back in fantasy as well. You can go check out my top 50, my way too early top 50 for 2025 on rotoworld.com right now, and you'll see I have Gibbs pretty high next year. I think he's a special player, and this Detroit offense is looking damn good. It was an impressive performance.
And a big night for Jared Goff as well. He's just been so consistent. But the bigger story, Jay, the 300 yards and 3 passing touchdowns, is that it was outdoors. And Goff is somebody we talked about during the preseason. You love the schedule because of how productive he is indoors. But he's maybe starting to slowly beat that narrative because in this offense, under Ben Johnson, with all the weapons in the offensive line, Goff is just good every single week.
Yeah, and you throw out the ridiculous 5-interception game against the Texans, and he does have MVP caliber numbers. Now, I don't think that Jared Goff belongs at the top of the MVP conversation with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I don't think he's played at the level of Joe Burrow either. And you can make your mind up on Saquon Barkley where he belongs there. But, I mean, Goff has been awesome in terms of VPA per play. He's right there with Allen and Jackson, and he's elevated his game. He's avoided the mistakes that have kind of defined his bad disaster games that he's had in years past. past outside of that Texans game. And look, they're in such sync, Goff and Ben Johnson, and they've had that continuity. They have the great O-line. They have all the weapons. They have the creativity. There aren't many offenses that you feel better about going to the playoffs than Detroit.
And another model of consistency, Matthew, this year was George Kittle, who finishes as tight end or leans as tight end 1 right now in points per game. And it's been unlike some Kittle seasons because he's a guy that he might miss time because of injury, or he might have these boom weeks. He might have some down weeks. It feels like, Matthew, this year for Kittle, he was the rare model of consistency at the tight end position that so consistently lacks it in fantasy.
Yeah, in a down year for the tight end position across the board, friend of the podcast, George Kittle, our buddy who's been on this show, has just a monster game. And to your point, yes, exactly. The consistency is what was sort of crazy because Kittle's always had kind of these blow-up games, but he's just sort of been like, on games where he's, being a big blocker and staying in, not really do it. But he had only 3 games this year. Only 3 games this year where he had below 14.5 fantasy points. Think about that. 14.5, he had that in every game this year except for 3, one of which was that snow game at Buffalo, which was just a disaster, but just, not only producing fantasy points, but consistently giving you something every single week. 19 red zone targets, which is tied for the second most among tight ends this year as well. Obviously, a real connection between him and Kittle. And for somebody that has struggled with injuries, like for a year in which the Niners were so banged up, Debo was banged up. Obviously, CMC, you think about Ayuk and that brutal injury as well. Kittle stayed relatively healthy. And so just kudos to George Kittle and everyone that drafted him. He was going around tight end 6 or 7. He's going to be a lot higher than that next year. He looks no signs of slowing down. Before we move on, though, I just want to say, because we had some sort of internet problems here or whatever, I don't know if it was on, I showed full bars, but for a reason, my internet went out for a second while I was taking my victory lap, and I came back in only to hear you animals, while I wasn't there, talking poorly about me, making loser excuses. That's what you do when you haven't won the league. When you've never won the league, you just sort of like, oh, well, he maybe had a second thought about a pick, or he missed this, or think about the very first year where we had to reset the draft twice because some people didn't know it was a super flex league. It was a whole thing. Yeah. I understand that. No, it's fine. No, it's whatever. This is loser mentality, and this is why you guys won't ever be champions. Is because you think like this until you get out of your mind. Take it from somebody who's a 2-time champion in the 3 years of this league. There are more years where I am champion this league than I am not in the entire history of the league. When you think about that. I just think it's important for you guys to try to change your mind frame. I'm trying to help you out here because at this point it's getting boring. All these championships that I keep winning, all these rings that I keep having. At some point I'm going to run out of fingers, guys. And so I need to pass down the knowledge to the younger generation. And so stopping to blame other people and trying to nitpick other people instead of dogging me, why don't you look at what I do? Why don't you try to learn from me? Why don't you try to emulate me? Why don't you try to say you know what? That's what I aspire to. That's what you should tell the team in the virtual locker room. That's where we're going. That's what we're trying to be.
Okay. Well, firstly, you won't run out of fingers because that's not how fingers work. Secondly, I'm not a very religious person, but I do think the big fella may have jumped in to cut out your internet before Matthew because that was divine intervention. That we didn't have to deal with that. But thank you for going back to the well on the victory lap. I hate.
We didn't have enough time in the beginning for that. All right, let's get into the Week 18 motivation factors here, of course, on a very unique waiver-wired week. Here are the must-win teams. They are playing for a playoff berth or a division title. The Ravens are playing for the AFC North against the Browns. The Steelers are playing for the AFC North if the Ravens lose before they play against the Bengals. The Bengals are playing for a wild card position against the Steelers, and obviously they need some things to break right for them. The Broncos are playing the Chiefs' backups for a wild card spot. The Dolphins are still in contention, but they have to beat the Jets, and that would be for a wild card spot if a couple of things break their way. The Vikings against the Lions, of course, that is Sunday Night Football. That is a massive game because it's the winner taking the NFC North and the number 1 seed. The Bucs against what's left of the Saints, that's for the NFC South. The Falcons are hoping and praying the Saints can pull off a miracle, and then they'd have to beat the Panthers to take the NFC South. But a lot going on here, Jay. I think the biggest one, notably, of course, is Vikings-Lions because the winner clinches the NFC North and the number 1 seed, so you're literally getting rest And if you lose, you fall all the way to the 5th seed, and the pathway becomes a lot longer.
Yeah, it's massive. The winner of this game will be the second favorite for the Super Bowl after Kansas City, and then the loser will see their odds significantly drift. It's just so important to get home field advantage, but more importantly, just to avoid having to play the extra game. So fantasy-wise, that's just everyone locked and loaded, everyone going all out there. I do think as well that Bengals-Steelers is effectively a must-win for both teams, because the Steelers, like, it is a huge difference. Let's assume that Baltimore beat Cleveland, and they were 18-point favorites, so they will probably beat Cleveland. But even so, there's a huge difference for the Steelers getting a 5 seed and playing a decrepit Texans team in the first round, or having to falling to the 6th seed and having to play Baltimore, who will be touchdown favorites in that game. So I think that is effectively must-win for the Steelers, even if Baltimore wins in the earlier game.
Yeah, and Matthew, obviously the Bengals still alive. It's been one of the better storylines down the stretch here. Just as a reminder, the Bengals not only need to obviously win against the Steelers, but they need the Broncos and the Dolphins to lose in that scenario. As Jay hinted at, the Steelers clinched the AFC North. They need a miracle loss from the Ravens, 17.5, 18-point favorites. They've been hovering around that against the Browns. They clinched the 5 seed with a win or a Chargers loss. And the Chargers, how they play, it'll depend on how things go before them. But I think, Matthew, everybody's rooting for the miracle that Joe Burrow's in the playoffs, but it's going to take a lot of help.
It is going to take a lot of help, but I don't think it's impossible, right? I mean, so two things need to happen, obviously. First off, we'll get to the Chiefs. We'll get to the Chiefs-Broncos game here in a second. But the Jets need to beat the Dolphins. Like, and I get it. The Dolphins, they went to Cleveland. They won a cold weather game with a backup quarterback. Okay, and I know the Jets looked absolutely awful. I don't know. Connor, I mean, we've spent so much time talking about the Jets, but that was such an embarrassing loss. And Aaron Rodgers with like a sub-2 QBR. I don't think they go out that way. I don't know. I think they sort of rally. This game's in New York as well at MetLife Stadium. I think they rally. So I don't think it's a given that the Dolphins win the Jets. By the way, the Dolphins going on the road to lose at a hopeless Jets team would be, the most Dolphins thing ever. It would be, very on brand for Miami. So I don't think that's impossible as well. But certainly you're starting Devon Achane, you're starting Jonnu Smith, starting Tyreek Hill. I thought Malik Washington, we didn't really get a chance to talk. I didn't get a chance to talk yesterday, but Malik Washington I thought looked really well in place of Jalen Waddle for the Dolphins this week. But let's talk about Kansas City game, because I've seen a lot of narrative out there about how Kansas City, quote unquote, would like to lose this game. That, that they're going to rest their starters, which is an interesting one. Andy Reid has done this before. Andy Reid has certainly, he's got a very veteran team. They're 2-time Super Bowl champions, so they know what they do, and they'll often rest starters in Week 18. But because they played the Wednesday game against Christmas, and so now it's a week and a half until this upcoming Sunday, Week 18. And then if they have the bye, that's another 2.5 weeks, right? And then you think about, okay, then their first playoff game. Do you really want to sit out, 3/4 of a month before you play actual football? So we'll see. So it's an interesting decision to see what Andy Reid does. And even if Mahomes doesn't play, Kelsey doesn't play, a couple of the bigger names, I think they're going to try to win this game. Because I've heard some people say, well, if they'd rather lose, they'd rather the Broncos make the playoffs than the Bengals, because they don't want to face Joe Burrow. And I get that. But they're 2-time Super Bowl champions. They're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. They've beaten all comers, right? They're the NFL equivalent of me in our fantasy league, right? They've taken everyone on for 2 straight years and come out champions for 2 straight. They're not scared of anyone. And so I think that Andy Reid, I just feel like jokes aside, I think it's a loser mentality. I don't think they want to I literally don't think the Chiefs want to say hey, we're going to try to lose. And now they're trying to go for a three-peat. I don't think they're scared of the Bengals, a bottom 5 defense. Yes, Joe Burrow is amazing. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, they're having magical years. But Chase Brown is banged up, and that defense is awful. I think if I'm Andy Reid, I think you want to beat – by the way, they barely beat the Broncos. They were a fluke blocked field goal away from losing to the Broncos the last time they played Denver. So I don't think it's I don't think it's let's get Denver in because they're an easier out than the Chiefs. I think they're even with some other stars on the bench. I think they're going to try to win this game, and I think they've got a shot, guys.
Yeah, we're going to revisit a lot of the teams that are, like you're saying, Matthew, locked into their spots and don't necessarily have a ton to play for in terms of improving their seeding. and how they'll handle it. And that's a big conversation around teams like the Chiefs, the Chargers, obviously the Texans, and even the Bills and the Eagles to an extent, although we've gotten more clarity from those coaches, it felt like at the top of the week. Let's look at some of the waiver targets for these must-win teams, because if you're still playing in Week 18, this might matter a lot to you right now. So these are for the must-win teams. Michael Penix is out there in 86% of leagues. He's got the Panthers. Tyler Huntley against the Jets if Tua really can't go with the hip injury he's been dealing with. Khalil Herbert, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Audric Estime. Jalen McMillan, who's been phenomenal. He doesn't meet our threshold because he's under 50%, but worth a look out there. If you're in a league crazy enough playing a championship in Week 18, maybe they're crazy enough that Jalen McMillan is on the waiver wires. Marvin Mims, who had a monster week against the Bengals last week, and Mike Gesicki against the Steelers here. I think we start with Jaleel McLaughlin here, Jay, against the Chiefs in the spot where this backfield has been really, really tough to figure out. But the good news is, if it is in theory against backups, a spot for somebody like McLaughlin to have some success.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when they looked good against the Bengals was when they were running the ball. And in the fourth quarter, McLaughlin had an excellent drive. But, yeah. I mean, how do you think this shakes out in terms of the split between McLaughlin and Estime?
I think McLaughlin gets enough that you can throw him in your flex if you're desperate. I think anything beyond that, like leaning on predicting Estime, is just a dangerous game at this point, unless you think he has this goal line viability, but we haven't even seen enough to prove that. And I thought, back to your point, like when McLaughlin, when they were springing him past the line of scrimmage, you just see the explosiveness and the speed for an undersized guy. So Matthew, he feels like the guy that, you know, if you were taking a real shot here, just because you've seen it in recent weeks and you do like the matchup, assumingly against second stringers, that you'd feel comfortable with, right?
Yeah, he has led the backfield in each of the past two healthy games that he has played, weeks 13 and 17 for McLaughlin. 24 carries for 153 yards in those two games, averaging over 6 yards per carry. And yes, Kansas City, in theory, has a good defense for running backs, but there'll be some second stringers. And I think that it is easier for a running back to attack Kansas City through the passing game, and McLaughlin is more of the passing down back. I know we've seen some Javonte Williams in that role as well. It's dicey, right? It is Sean Payton, they mix and match. But I do think we've seen enough production from McLaughlin that if you're desperate, that he is, I agree with Jay, flex viable this week against Kansas City.
And to revisit Jalen McMillan, he's been so good down the stretch here. We knew it would take an injury to one of their top receivers this season for him to get involved. And it took even a little while after Chris Godwin got hurt because Cade Otton was getting a lot of targets. But if you look at McMillan's last 4 games, Matthew, I mean, he's been excellent for this Bengals offense, for this Bucs offense. And Baker Mayfield is consistently looking his way. The target share has been a big positive for the rookie over the last 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a 19% target share since week 14, 3 straight games now with 5 or more receptions, 6 touchdowns over his last 4 games. They're looking for him in close-in situations. He's getting, these aren't just one fluky play. As you see there, he has 7 targets, 6 targets, 5 targets, 7 targets, like all over the place. And I think the other important thing is he's earned the trust of Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield is playing at an elite level. We already talked about the fact the Buccaneers need to win this game to win the NFC South. I think they're going to go all out to try to beat New Orleans. So McMillan, if somehow is still available in your league, is very worthy of a start. Want to go back to that Denver and Kansas City game real quickly here. Marvin Mims, who is somebody, Connor, I know we talked about on draft day, and we really liked him. We liked him for the speed that he brought to Sean Payton's offense. We said, this is a guy that can burn down the field. This is somebody that can be a field stretcher. And then in his rookie year, he didn't really seem to get on the field a lot. We were like, free Marvin Mims. Why can't he get on the field? Well, suddenly he is, right? He's now had 60 receiving yards in 3 of the past 4 games. Season high 25% target share. Had the great catch in the end zone for a touchdown. Ended up actually scoring twice. He's been a big part of why Bo Nix has emerged as a legitimate NFL quarterback. His 2 highest route participation games of the year have come in each of the last 2 weeks. So he is starting to get hot at the right time and becoming more of a featured part of this Broncos passing attack. Feels like he's the number 2 after Cortland Sutton there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matthew. This is a team that needed a field stretcher. And with Mims, the enigma of him is he just needs to be on the field. And it feels like Sean Payton has finally leaned into that. Oddly enough, after having such a good college connection, it hasn't been there for Troy Franklin and Bo Nix right now, so that leads even more vertical opportunities for Mims. Let's look at the want to win teams, right? These are the playoff teams vying for better seeding. Maybe it's not a must-win situation, but they are playing for something, which is very important here. The Steelers right now against the Bengals, that is for the 5 seed if Baltimore takes care of their expected business against the Browns. The Chargers against the Raiders. If the Steelers lose, they could be playing for the 5 seed. And we know Harbaugh is crazy enough that might not matter, as he feels very the Campbell route. We'll have more on that later. The Rams against the Seahawks. If the Bucs take care of their business, the Rams are then playing for the 3 seed. The Commanders against the Cowboys. If the Packers lose, the Commanders are playing for the 6 seed. And then, obviously, vice versa, if the Commanders lose. And I believe they're playing at the exact same time. So, obviously, you feel like the motivation is there for both of these teams to win. If the Packers beat the Bears and the Commanders lose, then they take the 6 seed instead. So, one important note here, the AFC number 5 seed will play at the Texans in the wild card round. The 6 seed will play at the winner of the AFC North, which is a jarring difference, Jay, if you've watched the teams, notably the Ravens, that hover atop the AFC North, compared to what the Texans have gone through this second half of the season.
Yeah, it's a huge deal. And just in terms of how the market prices these teams, the Ravens right now are considered around a touchdown better than the Texans on neutral. So it's a huge difference. Like this is, and also the other impact of this as well is that I think that with what they've respectively shown, round 2, you'd probably rather go play Kansas City than Buffalo, I think. Now, other people might disagree, think that the Chiefs have an extra gear in the postseason, which I think is a totally fine opinion to have. But in a nutshell, Buffalo have been playing better than Kansas City. And so I do think there are worlds where if the Chargers or the Steelers get into the 5 seed, they could absolutely beat Houston. And then it's not like they're drawing dead against the Chiefs in round 2 either. So there's a path to the AFC title game where you can then get stomped by Baltimore. But I think there is a path to get there. And so I think what is going to happen here is that I think Pittsburgh are going to play all out no matter what. I think that if Pittsburgh wins and the Chargers have nothing to play for, I do think that based on what Harbaugh, the way he was talking around it, I do think he will rest guys. But if the Steelers lose, then I think the Chargers will go all out for the 5 seed.
Oh, yeah, and the beauty of it is with the Steelers playing, the AFC North teams playing on Saturday, they'll know. Yeah. So there's not going to be the uncertainty with this compared to on the NFC side, Matthew. It's a little bit more up in the air here. So the NFC number 6 seed will play at the Rams or Bucs/Falcons. The favorites would tell you the Bucs, but crazier things have happened in the wild card. And then the 7 seed would go play at Philadelphia, which is obviously maybe the worst matchup in the entire opening there of the playoffs. So your Commanders, Matthew, obviously playing for a win against the hobbled Cowboys in this spot.
Yeah, this is I think it's an important game for Washington. Like, first off, it's a young team. I don't think Dan Quinn, who should be coach of the year, and he's not going to win it, but Dan Quinn, Kevin O'Connell's done a great job here. But I mean, honestly, the Vikings won like 7 games. I'll get on a soapbox later about that. Whatever. The Vikings, other than the quarterback, the Vikings top to bottom have a much better roster than the Commanders last year going into this year, and still again this year. I think Quinn's reclamation project has been much better than Kevin O'Connell, who should get credit for Sam Darnold, rightfully so. It's been an unbelievable season for the Vikings and KOC, but anyway, Dan Quinn is my coach of the year. Having said all that, all right, they need to win this game. You do not want to go on the road to play Philadelphia. You would much rather play at LA or at Tampa Bay /Atlanta. You feel much better about those matchups than you do about having to go on the road to Philadelphia, a tough Eagles team that you barely beat if you're the Commanders. We barely beat them, with Kenny Pickett under center, basically, right? So I think that this is an important one. I think they want to win. I think Dallas will, once again, they got embarrassed last week against the Eagles, but I think they'll try to get up for this game as well. Unbelievable game for the Commanders, who every week just seem to pull out these victories. 5 turnovers against the Eagles, but they pull it out. Like, they let the Saints back into the game, but they managed to stop the 2-point conversion. They let the Falcons back into the game, but then Jaden Daniels drives them down and scores a touchdown at the very end because you can only hope to – you can't stop Olamide Zaccheaus. You can only hope to contain them. But I do think they'll go all out for this game. I do think they'll have success against the Cowboys.
Yeah, and the bottom line is the Commanders control their destiny here, Jay, playing for the 6th seed. Like, it's a win, and okay, we're avoiding the Philadelphia scenario, so just simply go out and win. And they're obviously favored against the Cowboys. The last one, the Rams wild card matchup. With a win or a Bucs loss, they're the 3 seed, and they're going to host the Commanders or Packers. With a loss and a Bucs win, they're the 4 seed, and they host the loser of Vikings-Lions. That's another one. It's a jarring difference. In theory, Sean McVay is somebody that we know he's careful with his players, but the Rams need to go out and be trying to win this game.
Yeah, I don't really understand what's going on here because the line has moved 7 points in the direction of the Seahawks, which implies that the Rams are not going to go all out to win this game. The Seahawks right now are 3-point favorites, 3.5. They opened as 3.5-point dogs. So the market thinks that the Rams don't really care about this, which I don't understand because I'd much rather be hosting likely Washington in the 6 than having to host the loser of Minnesota-Detroit. Now, it's not like Washington are a bad team or anything, and they will be dangerous in any matchup, but I would have thought that the Rams would much prefer to be in the 3 seed. So that is interesting. I do wonder if there is an element of the fact that, like, Kupp, Stafford have just not looked good the past 3 weeks. And I wonder if they think that just giving those guys an extra week of rest, that offsets the difference between playing Washington and Minnesota, Detroit. I'm sure McVay's going to make the best decision for his team, but it is strange that line has moved so much in a game that theoretically does have stakes.
And a running back in Kyron Williams that does carry the rare modern-day workhorse load. So you're right, Jay. Maybe it is a fact that McVay's just looking at it and going, hey, I'd rather us be healthy and we'll prepare for anybody. We don't care about that. We think it's close enough. The line movement would tell you that's the route they're going, but this is a true coin flip one in terms of how they manage it. Let's look at the Week 18 waiver targets for this bracket of teams right here. So as you see, Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks, they are at the top of the list here. Quentin Johnson against the Raiders, Calvin Austin against the Bengals, Olamide Zaccheaus against the Cowboys, who has taken on a bigger role in this Commanders offense, and Zach Ertz, who's been one of the best values at tight end all year in the Commanders offense. Matthew, let's start with your man, Zaccheaus here, 97% available against the Cowboys. He's been phenomenal the last 2 weeks. I know the drop is in people's minds at the end of the last game, but fantasy production, he's been very, very good.
He has been. You know, on Fantasy Football pregame last Sunday morning, he was my desperation play. And I talked about the fact that Diami Brown was out, Noah Brown was out. They're looking for pass catchers in Washington opposite Terry McLaurin. And it seems like at the moment they've settled on that it's going to be Olamide Zaccheaus. You see Jamison Crowder on your screen there. He's in the slot. But back-to-back games now with 20 or more fantasy points for Olamide Zaccheaus. He's had a 24% target share over the last 2 weeks as well. And he made a bunch of clutch catches. He got the clutch touchdown, made a really nice catch against the Eagles, and obviously had just a monster game against the Falcons overall. Yes, one drop, but whatever. Overall, had a very good game against Atlanta. A revenge game for Olamide Zaccheaus. OZ, as those in the know like to call him. Oh. And by those in the know, I really mean just me. I've never heard anyone else call him that.
We'll continue to.
Those in the dark call him OZ. Yeah. In the closet.
We're going to take our first break. When we're back, we got more Week 18 motivations for you right after this.
I know what this was, and there's all these arguments about what did this game really mean, because of next week, I respect the out of you guys. I respect the out of how we roll the ball out and you guys just go out and compete. I can't even put it into words, man. I cannot put it into words. I love the hell out of you guys. I love the hell out of you guys.
That was Lions coach Dan Campbell in the locker room. I mean, that guy plays to win all the time.
Never seen anything like this. This isn't like a football season. It's like a religious mission.
Yes.
I'm here for it. I'm all for this destiny, the fact that he's always saying, like, we're all meant to be here together. Man, it's, it fires you up. Well, but I don't know. I still don't think they should have played their guys, but they got out of the game alive and they get the 1 seed next time.
He's established a DNA and a mindset of winning in a place that didn't have that for so long. And it's not easy to do that. Yeah. So I think when people kind of made fun of him for being this, a lot of hyperbole and stuff, no, it's authentically him, and he's been able to do it.
Yeah, I tweeted out on Thanksgiving, I think, that, like, who dislikes this Lions team? Like, this has to have the most, like, universal approval, critical. Even then, it's like, it's such a fun team. Yeah. So I think that, most neutral. And, I mean, they're going up against the Vikings, who are also have universal approval. So, very critically acclaimed matchup on Sunday Night Football coming up.
Let's look at the playoff vibes teams. These are teams that are technically locked into their playoff seeding right now, with one caveat at the bottom there, that the Chargers, they're locked in if the Steelers win. And we'll get in deeper to that in a second if things change for that. But the Eagles, they're locked into the number 2 seed. They're playing the Giants. The Chiefs, they're the number 1 seed in the AFC. The Bills, they're the number 2 seed in the AFC. The Texans are the number 4 seed in the AFC. None of that can change. So, Matthew, you broke down, hey, sure, the Chiefs are going to play backup, so it doesn't mean they're just going to roll over. The Chargers are kind of an interesting scenario because Jim Harbaugh said this week, we're playing to move up. We'd love to be in the 5th seed playing to win. Obviously, that is out of their control depending on how things go Saturday, because if the Steelers win on Saturday, then they're locked into the 6th seed. If that happens, Matthew, do you see Jim Harbaugh as a guy that goes the Dan Campbell route and just gets some guys reps anyway?
Feels like it. He just feels like that guy. I mean, keep in mind, this is they lost Gus Edwards, so they just got J.K. Dobbins back for the in the Patriots game. I mean, those guys were in late in the fourth. It took until like the final drive, I think, till Taylor Heineke showed up for the Chargers as well, right? You've got young receivers, and you obviously got the rookie McConkey, but QJ Quentin Johnson still dealing with drops as well. They just got Will Dissly back. They just got J.K. Dobbins back. So trying to, they're trying to get some more reps for Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal and, some of the defensive players as well. And so I think, yes, I don't know that they play the full game here, but I think that like the Chargers that you would actually play, J.K. Dobbins, Lad McConkey, Herbert maybe, like I think you can still feel good. I guess unless we get reporting between now and Sunday morning, of course, we're going to break all this down for you, Fantasy Football pregame. We're back again this Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern, all the way up until kickoff on Peacock and the NFL and NBC YouTube channel, Accompany Man. I do think they'll play enough, and that Harbaugh's mentality, trying to instill a new winning culture in LA, et cetera, I think they go more Dan Campbell than, we're resting everyone. I also think, by the way, Sirianni's got a little bit of that too. He's a very different kind of guy than Dan Campbell or Jim Harbaugh, but there is a fieriness to Nick Sirianni, and I think they are going to want to try to get Saquon the record at least for like the first half. So it feels like the Eagles play at least. I think they play a half. Would be my guess, and I'm using guess in strong quotes here.
Yeah, I have some quotes from Sirianni that he said during our taping here. We'll get into both the Bills and the Eagles because they're each locked into the number 2 seed. The Texans locked into the number 4 seed. This is different, Jade, in my opinion, than the Chargers, because the Chargers, things have been relatively fine throughout the course of the season. The Texans, they're locked into the 4 seed. They've lost their last 2 games. There is a thought, hey, we need to get rolling here. We don't care if it's against Tennessee and Mason Rudolph. D'Amico Ryan's quote was, everyone will be out there playing. That's what he said this week. Now, that quote still applies if you take guys out after the first quarter. But I think the Texans, they need to use this almost as a tune-up preseason game. Yeah,
I think this is going to be like one of those old-fashioned Week 3 preseason games in years past before they adjusted, where you do play the starters for a chunk. I think that based on all the comments, based as well on the line moving, it opened Texans +4 is now Texans -1. I think we're going to see a couple, maybe even a few series of Stroud before the starters get pulled. And even then, like in terms of the game itself, like, the Texans don't have the worst backup quarterback situation in the world with Davis Mills.
Yeah, Davis Mills is fine.
Yeah, so I think that, I think this will be, they will be playing to win for a while.
All right, Matthew, these are the ones that are peculiar, right? The Bills and the Eagles. Now, the Bills, head coach Sean McDermott, he was pretty honest this week, all things considered. He said Josh Allen's going to go out there. He's going to continue his streak as a starter, so he'll take a snap or whatever it may be, and they're going to get him out of the game pretty quickly, and they're going to be kind of in observe mode with a couple players, but it's not going to be the Bills. The Bills are going to be very, very delicate against the Patriots. The Eagles, as you hinted at, Matthew, this is a much more interesting scenario with Nick Sirianni and the Saquon Barkley potential record. So he was asked on WIP Sports Radio in Philadelphia this morning. He said, still thinking through a little bit. take a lot into account. What's the best thing for the team? Also, what's the best things for the individuals for the record? He says he's going to talk to everybody, including ownership, including the front office. He also referenced in 2021, Smitty was going for the rookie receiver record. We didn't play some other guys in that game, but we went and got him that record. Every situation is a little different, not saying one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I will say, if ever there was a player that has the right attitude, right? You know, because Sirianni's got some real decisions to make here. But Saquon Barkley's been very, hey, whatever coach decides, like the record would be nice, but the most important thing here is we're trying to win a Super Bowl. And whatever it is to help us prepare there. So, you know, he's not putting any public pressure on it. He is, you know, a selfless dude and is like, whatever we need to do. I think the Eagles want to. The other thing is that, and Coach Garrett talked about this. We on the Football Night in America podcast that I do with Maria Taylor, Devin McCourty, Jason Garrett, and Mike Florio. I was about to say Devin Singletary there for a second. Sorry. But what the FNIA pod that we do, we talked about this, and one of the things I brought up there is I said, look, you know what? They don't know if they're going to have Jalen Hurts there. So, like, they need to get Kenny Pickett some more reps, honestly, if there's a chance that Hurts misses a playoff game. Like, Cedric Tillman's still out with a concussion, man. Concussions can last. They can last for a long time. So we don't know what stage. There's 5 stages of the concussion protocol that Jalen Hurts has to clear, and we don't know what stage he's in. The Eagles have been very mum about that. So he could still be in stage 1 for all we know. And the other thing that I'll say here, and Coach Garrett talked about this as well, because it's not just like, oh, let's pull let's pull Jalen Hurts, or let's pull Saquon Barkley, because you've got the offensive line. If you want to get guys right, if you want to get Kenny Pickett ready, like, you can't get him out there with backup linemen and, you know, backup wide receivers. Like, you sort of got to, if you're running the offense, you got to run the offense. So it's not just as easy as saying, like, we're going to do everything, but without Saquon Barkley. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's a lot that goes into it as well. I think this is such a big story that we will have more clarity between now and Sunday at 1 o'clock. But my guess as we sit here today is that A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley play a half, sort of as Jay was talking about, kind of a week 3 preseason game, an old school week 3 preseason game where they play a half, enough to try to get him the record, but also let's not get crazy and let's not risk injury that long. Let's get in there, let's get in the record, let's get out, and get a couple of reps as well.
While a win won't do anything for the Bills and Eagles, a loss for each of them ironically can, because they are playing division opponents that have high-stakes draft implications on the line. The Patriots right now are sitting with the number 1 overall pick. They have projected chances of over 50% of staying there. It'll depend on how they handle the Bills' backups, and obviously the Eagles against the Giants, who the Giants already had a win to sabotage their number 1 pick chance. Let's take a look at the Week 18 waiver targets for the playoff 5 teams. Just a couple names to keep an eye on here. Obviously, Carson Wentz is getting the start. Mitch Trubisky not getting the start, but is going to come in very, very quickly. Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, the backup running backs for the Bills that are involved week in and week out and are effective. Dameon Pierce, Kenneth Gainwell, Keon Coleman, John Metchie, and Jahan Dotson. So a lot of typical backups to keep an eye on. And we continue our Week 18 motivations. These are the love of the game teams. These are the eliminated teams. These teams are just playing to finish out seasons that have been, largely disappointing. We mentioned, and then some of them, honestly, if you're a fan and you're caring about the long term, you're thinking draft implications. We mentioned the Patriots. We mentioned the Giants. The Jets are in the top 10 right now. They could vault all the way up to number 2. A lot of things would have to break. Same with the Browns against the Ravens, as Jay hinted. They're 18-point underdogs. Jacksonville against the Colts, big draft implications on the line. The Colts, Titans, Raiders. The Raiders have really fallen in the draft order. The Cowboys, the Bears, the Panthers. The Saints are in a very unique spot. They are the only team in the NFL with 5 wins. The Bucs are playing to win, so they might just land right there with the 10th overall pick. The Niners, Cardinals, and Seahawks. Now, the waiver targets list is much longer for these eliminated teams because they're riding out the season, and that's why we start with Drake May and Bryce Young at the top. Joe Flacco finishing out the season for the Colts. Ameer Abdullah here, Matthew, maybe the most interesting one against the Chargers. Antonio Pierce is coaching for his job. He's playing to win, and there's not going to be any holding back with the Raiders here in Ameer Abdullah.
No, there isn't. He's looked good. He's one of the reasons we talked about him on fantasy football pregames. I said he's looked like the best. He's looked better than Alexander Madison. He's looked like these guys, and I don't know that why you would go away from him. Yes, Antonio Pierce is cut from the same kind of Jim Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, football guy mode that, like, we're playing to win. He is coaching for his job, and I think for the most part, you have some guys that are, they just, if you're out on the field, you want to try to win. So Abdullah last week, obviously part of the championship winning live at noon on the cock, the two-time back-to-back champion team live at noon on the cock, Ameer Abdullah. People laughed at me, and yet there he showed up with 17.7 fantasy points, bringing Big Show down, helping with that. So I do think if you're playing in Week 18, Abdullah is kind of interesting among these teams that don't have, quote-unquote, anything to play for.
All right, we're going to take one more break when we're back, as we do on Tuesday, and we're running out of time to do this. We got Back to the Futures bets, our favorite awards bets, win totals, playoff projections, Super Bowl winners, coming up right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook.
The crown
is yours.
I think, yep. I just checked. It's yours. Yeah,
Back to the futures. What do you got for us, Jay?
That's Sam Darnold for Comeback Player of the Year, which is plus 450 at DraftKings. I think there has been the thought that he is not eligible for this award because he's not injured. Actually, look at the guidelines. That's not what it says. It says that any circumstances, other circumstances that cause you to miss playing time the year before, that makes you eligible. You have to demonstrate resilience in the face of adversity. I think Darnold has done that. I think he has a very compelling story for voters.
What about you, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm also staying on the Vikings here as well. I think they win this Sunday against Detroit on NBC and Peacock. I'm a company man. And I think the Minnesota Vikings to win the NFC, they're at plus 380. But to me, they're the most complete team in terms of offense and defense. Detroit just so beat up. And I'm nervous about the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. So I do think the Eagles, I think the Vikings win home field. I think they win the NFC. Give me the Vikings at 380 to win the NFC.
Yeah, that NFC bracket is going to be a lot of fun to break down in the coming weeks. It is jam tight. All right, guys, I'm looking at the odds for the 2025 NFL Draft, and I just don't understand. Travis Hunter is the best player in the draft, and he's plus 350. I understand him not being the favorite because he's not a quarterback, but he does play two positions, wide receiver and corner. I think he's going to try to do both at the NFL level. The Patriots, if they stay at #1, they won't need to take a quarterback. And, yeah, maybe they could trade down, but I don't think teams are going to be that excited to come up for Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward. They might stay pat and say, hey, want to fall into our lap? New England goes, sure, we'll take the best player in the draft. Plus 350 is great value. I bet about 2 months before this draft, this will be closer to plus 150, even plus 100. That's it for us. For the champion of the League of Assholes, Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher, I am merely Connor Rogers. Happy New Year, everyone. We'll catch you on Thursday.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.